You, it's good. We live out.
John?
What's going on, YouTube? What's popping?
All right.
Yeah, I'm finishing stuff in my face. So
Yeah.
what's going on? So uh for those that don't know my guest here, he goes by the name of Adam MGTOW, aka Adam ibmor on Facebook. And he's gained a reputation for being one of the most researched guys in the Facebook space. Um, and people have been begging him to open up a YouTube page for some time
Oh
now.
yeah,
Mhm.
that's true.
That's cool, but I got him here, and this was his topic. He wanted to talk about the New Deal, right? Now, some people know what the New Deal is, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna let you explain pretty much what the premise of what we're talking about today is. Explain what the New Deal is.
All right. So the concept of the New Deal is a culmination of many topics that were discussed by other sources such as Dennis Sperling. Um, Kevin Samuels mentioned something akin to it on his show every now and then. For example, he was talking about a ways modern arrangements for modern men and modern women. Dennis Sperling was talking about the social contract. So no one specifically mentioned the New Deal as a structure. More so was something in passing that they kind of spoke about. And then we have, what people have been speaking about for quite some time now, how the traditional arrangements of marriage, on the one hand, the feminists, they hate the traditional thought of marriage. They're like, look, it's oppressive, it's slavery, et cetera, and so forth. I'm not saying whether they're right or wrong for this particular discussion. I'm just saying this is what they say, right? On the other
Mm-hmm.
hand, you have what MGTOW have been saying, what some IBMORs have believe or what they've been saying. IBMORs are not necessarily against marriage, but they know what it is, right? And so you have people saying that basically marriage doesn't benefit men, and if you're going to sell marriage to a man, you have to tell him why it's beneficial, like what he gets out of it in the modern arrangement, right? The traditional arrangement, the man, in summary, the man provides and protects, the woman supports and submits, right? And feminists, they don't want to support and submit. And by and large, men are like, look, if I'm going to provide and protect, and I'm not getting support and submission, then what am I doing this for? And then, of course, you have the involvement of the government by means of the family courts, et cetera, and so forth, and the carceral system as well, right?
Yeah.
Um, so the question becomes, well, if traditional marriage doesn't work, then what's the alternative, right? Now you have uh, the faux traditionalism, or I'm going to cite my source directly, or what um, Dr. C.S. Johnson states as the concept of the concuserf, the combination of a concubine and a serf, right? Where in this arrangement, the woman basically has no responsibilities, and the man has to take on the traditional roles of a woman and the traditional roles of a man. That's one phenomenon that we've been observing recently, and of course, it's not going to stick very long because why would a man want to do that, right? But that's one option. So what's the alternative, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we can't have the traditional patriarchal arrangement, and we can't, and obviously that faux traditionalism by means of serfdom doesn't work, right? For
Yeah.
men, then what exactly do we have? Now you have all sorts of arrangements that are around now, but this is where the concept of the New Deal comes in.
Yeah.
Now, I thought you were
Uh,
going to speak to the comment.
yeah. No doubt. So basically, this is the men's side of it, where it's like, okay, for a long time we have been told that we have a gender role, and that's cool, but the women do not want to assume a gender role. Okay, so basically what it is people are looking for men to pretty much remain traditional while women go contemporary because that's what works for them. Like, for men to continue to, it's funny enough, and I guess we'll get to this, continue to act in a patriarchal fashion, even though we get all these speeches and everything else that pretty much says it's the opposite of what women want, but it's not really. Like, you're demanding that men act in a patriarchal fashion because people talk as if patriarchy is 100% oppressive, or demands, everything that it demands is, just from women. Actually, patriarchy, and the word patriarch, tends to mean, paternal, or father, or whatever the case may be. You want men to act in a fatherly fashion, where we take care of everything, and et cetera, et cetera. Because that's what patriarchy tends to be. Like, patriarchy tends to actually obligate men more than anyone else.
Indeed.
Yeah, it
And
obligates, because most of the things. I'm sorry.
So go ahead. Go ahead.
Now, most of the things that men are bringing to a patriarchy situation, tangibles, and they have real value, inherent value. And to be honest, like, in a balanced patriarchy, the woman, of course, brings her, I guess, service to the and it's a balanced service to that arrangement. If women are not willing to bring that, then the social contract is broken. It's just an understanding, society is a man-made thing, right? Men created society, and men created society, in all of its benefits and protections and things of that nature. So, when you say society, you're also saying socials. The social contract is, we've built this thing, we've created this thing. It's a construct because society isn't nature. So we've built this thing, and there's an unspoken agreement that, okay, for the women, if we allow you to come into this thing that we built, we will protect you, this, that, and the third, and we will also protect and provide for any offspring, or whatever the case may be. And there's, of course, rules in the social contract that says, one is obligated to his offspring and the woman who sprung them, right? But again, this used to offer certain guarantees to the man. You know what I'm saying? Like, though that woman and those children are obligated to him, or at least the woman is, but of course, you want your kids to respect you and love you and things of that nature. But now,
Indeed.
that contract is broken to where you're not even guaranteed that. You're not guaranteed any role or authority over your children, and the woman is not yours, but you still have to provide and do all of these other things for them, right? So, and we're not just talking about single mothers. We're also talking about in marriage situations where women could just walk out of the marriage, on a whim, and they're still guaranteed these things in this society.
Indeed. And I just wanted to add to a point you were making earlier, but it dovetails with this, that even in matrilineal societies, right, where lineage is counted down through on the mother side, not the father, or on matrifocal societies, right, where the center of the family is the mother and not the father, right, the matriarch instead of the patriarch, the labor of men and male obligations still resemble a patriarch, right? And
Mm-hmm.
even if you look at the Tuareg, which are it's one of the largest, it's a large nomadic tribe or ethnic group rather in Africa along the Sahelian region, right? They're famous for being a matriarchal society. And when you look at the society, there's no structures, namely to their name. There's no situated kingdom per se. It's really an organization of tents and tent houses. Now, I'm not insulting whatever the structures or things like that. It's a really beautiful, interesting culture. But the fact of the matter is, the people who do the fighting, the people who do the labor, the people who do the trade, and so forth, are right. The women are they have inordinate power, right? They can kick their husbands out their tent at any time. They can they have all types of power, but the people who still do the labor that makes their society run is still men. And so whether you look at a matriarchy, you look at a matrilineal society, you look at a matrifocal society, or you look at a patriarchy, the people who do the tangible things, the things with inherent value, like you said, are still men, right? Now, the benefits and rewards for men in each type of society changes, but in our particular case, we're talking about patriarchy because we live under or within and have built and contributed towards a Western civilization, right? Especially as Black people, we have, in America, we basically help structure and build this country, and so we are part of that. In a sense, that patriarchal structure, even though we've never truly received the benefits of it. But now we've arrived at a point where the few things that we were guaranteed, right? When you get a wife, okay, she's going to be submissive, supportive. At least I'm going to have that. The few things that you were supposed to be guaranteed in theory, right? But if we look at Franklin E. Frazier's work, we know Black men never really received the type of submission and support that are alleged. But a few things we're supposed to receive in theory, now it's guaranteed you're not going to get. I think before it was implied you might get it. Now you know for a fact you ain't getting none of that shit. That's not happening, right? So, now what's the man to do? So that's where the New Deal comes in. And without beating around the bush, I'm going to get right down to what it is.
Wait, hold on. Before you get there, I wanted to ask you a question before you got right into the New Deal. Explain the matrilineal setup and what men benefit from that and the other setups and what men do or don't get from those, so that people have a better understanding. So, like, because we're talking about different setups, for anyone who says, well, patriarchy isn't working, let's try one of these other situations and let's see how those work out, and then we can discuss the New Deal.
All right, we could do that. Again, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go in more in depth on those different systems, like over a series of posts and stuff. But I'll explain it here as well. So a matrilineal system, but it's been a little while since I looked this up. But a matrilineal system, by and large, is practically the same thing as a patriarchal system, except you're counting the family lineage down the mother's line, and that was you find those in many parts of West Africa. That's why people. They've confused West African societies with matriarchal societies because some of them are matrilineal and some of them are matrifocal, right? The matrilineal, matra meaning mother and lineal meaning lineage, mother's lineage, it's just counting down the lineage of the mother due to the circumstances in West Africa at the time, and just not knowing whether a child is exactly a father's or not, due to, cultural circumstance. I'm not, some societies where women were more promiscuous than others, right? And so, as a practical concern, it's like, all right, we're going to count lineage down the mother's line. That way, we know that the king is the king, because a mother would certainly know who's her son, as opposed to a father not being able to tell which child is really his, right? Those societies were still patriarchies, right? It's just that instead of counting it down the father's line, it was counted down the mother's line. Especially, it's common in societies that allow for polygamy, right? Then you have matrifocal, which you find a lot, in societies. Even the Black people in the Caribbean are considered matrifocal, right? Where the big, even in Black America, you consider it like that. Before it became a true matriarchy, it was mostly matrifocal, right? Where the mother is the focal point of the family, right? It's big mama's house, you protect your mother this, mother that, mother that. Not to the point of mother goddess worship, which we've seen that cult come up, but to the point where the mother is the center of the family, even though the father's presence is felt and is necessary, the mother is the real centerpiece of what glues it together. That's what a matrifocal is. The man still does all the traditional things that he does in the patriarchy. And the mother, to an extent, will still do the same things in the matriarchy, but she's the center point of the family.
So what are men in these other situations benefiting? Like, how are they benefiting, if they are at all?
So I'm glad you asked. So in a matrilineal society, the man benefits the same way he does from a patriarchal society. It's just, so if he marries one wife and those are his children, right, and he has children by that woman, even though it's matrilineal, he knows those are his kids. That's, so if he made it with that woman, then he knows those are his kids. That's the point to the matrilineality, because she confirmed the lineage of the children, but she still does all the same things as far as submission and support goes. So the same benefits a man would have in a patriarchy, he would have in a matrilineal society.
Same thing.
For a matrifocal society, a matrifocal societies are more egalitarian, right? So even in a matrifocal society, a man would still mostly do his traditional roles, like as in patriarchy, like protection and provision. The woman would still, cook and maintain a house, but in matrifocal societies, women have more political leverage, right? They have more of a political say, right? If there's going to be a war, the husband could, typically in villages or ethnic groups, tribes, where they call up people to arms, where you have a people's army, right? You don't have a standing army, you just call all the men to battle. In a patriarchy, the men will decide whether they want to go to war or not, because they're the people that stand up. But in a matrifocal society, the men and the woman could decide. So she could say, well, I don't want my husband to go fight those people over there. So, right? Even if he wants to go.
So let me ask you, right? If these other setups, the matrilineal, matrifocal, are similar to patriarchy, but if men are still benefiting the way they would in the patriarchy, explain, I guess, the downfalls or the disadvantages of those systems to men. I mean, we know if they're working like patriarchies, do we know the benefits for women? That not only the benefits that they get from patriarchy, but the benefit that they get from either being the focus or being the person that is running or controlling the situation. Because from what you explained, I would say that the Black community is matrifocal. So and we also know that this shit ain't working out the way one would imagine. So explain the pitfalls of especially the matrifocal, because matrilineal is to be honest, matrilineal doesn't necessarily guarantee that the children that the women is having belong to the dad, because we're focused on what her lineage is. But I'm sorry.
I said no. That's primarily the point. It's mostly, it's good for people in positions like a king or something like that, because a mother will make sure that, like, if she has a child by the king and it's matrilineal, she's gonna make sure that her child becomes king, right? And so that's like, you'll hold that family line, or a chieftain or things like that. But for the average guy, it's not much. It doesn't make much of a difference. But for as far as royalty or positions that are inherited are concerned, as far as inheritance is concerned, that's what matrilineal. That's where you see its effects. But like you said, most of the time, it doesn't really make a difference for a man. Matrifocal, on the other point, that will make a difference. In my opinion, matrifocal societies will often become matriarchies given the right circumstances, and I believe that's what happened in Black America, right? It was matrifocal at the beginning, when the first Black women started showing up around 1790, more or less, right? In number. I was reading in a book called Fighting for Honor by Professor T.J. Obideshi, and there's a part in there where he spoke about how it was a book about African American martial arts and the diaspora and stuff. But he made a point to mention that slaves would, or bondsmen as he called them, would leave plantations and even risk life and limb at night to go to these parties at other plantations, secret gatherings where they would vie for the attention of Black women and do impressive feats, music, dancing, fighting, and things of that nature to gain the attention of women, right? Because black women were so few in number, to be able to get a black wife, right? It was highly prized, especially considering the fact that black men basically had no means of sexual relief. You're not gonna, unless you're being a white woman chooses you, you're not having sex with white women, and chances are, as we already know, that was a form of abuse. But when you try to, when it comes to black women, they weren't there in equal numbers. It was very rare to find black women before 1790, and so this is where I believe this is where simping among black Americans evolved from, this plantation mindset, literally plantation mindset, because there weren't black women there. And so that's where black society started becoming matrifocal, right? Because the focus was on the mother, right? And the woman being able to spread your lineage. Now you can have a lineage, because before you worked until you died, there was no lineage, right? Now, when did it become a matriarchy is when black women actually started getting power, because that's the difference between matriarchy and patriarchy, between matrilineal and matrifocal. Patriarch means man has political power, and they can do things with resources, right? They can say things that make things happen. When it comes to a matriarchy, it's women who have political power and can say things that make things happen. And when you look at black America, after slavery, and over time, you see black women gaining more and more political power. And this is when we start becoming matriarchy, until the point where now we're a full-blown gynocracy, because it's not just about mothers who have power, but any woman has power. Any black woman has power in the black community, mother or not.
Well, okay, so let's also point out for the people that don't know, the first slaves that came over here, there were no women on them first ships. Women came later to North America, black women. They did not come on the original slave ships. Women were brought here to breed. And women did not do the bulk of the slave work in chattel slavery. They even at some point owned male slaves, black women.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that they're evil. I'm just saying the truth, right? So, of course, these sorts of things create an imbalanced dynamic, which is, of course, not patriarchy. So fast forward to today, like you said, here we are today. These other situations being what they are. So now that we're here, and we're on the fourth or fifth wave feminism, explain the New Deal.
So now, we've covered quite a bit of history here, but I think it brings us precisely to what the New Deal is. Over time, the deal that black men was getting increasingly more and more raw, right? You had more structure, more of a patriarchal. It was after the Civil War that black men first began having some form of patriarchal control, because they were the ones who were allowed to work, and they were the soldiers. So they came back with some form of pension, some form of pay, and they came back with some sort of resources. But over time, it became, we started seeing men get more and more of a raw deal. So when we look at today, we already explained what black men are not getting, right? And we already know what black men are expected to bring. So what we're doing now with the New Deal is saying, you know what? We're not going to give you what you want us to give, not for free. We're going to have to make a deal that's fair. We're going to make a deal that's going to be something that we want in exchange for something you want. Because clearly the old social contract wasn't working, right? So the New Deal has two goals. It's to give the maximum amount of benefits that black men can get. Well, any man, but really this is designed primarily as a black man to other black men, but pretty much any man could use the same concept of the New Deal, right? It's designed to give the maximum amount of benefits from a woman as possible in exchange for what she's asking of you, right? And number two, to give the maximum amount of protections, financial, legal, political, and so forth, the maximum amount of protections to the man, right? But rather each party, but pretty much mostly the man, as possible. That's the whole point to the New Deal, right? We want men to have the maximum amount of protections possible. By default, women have the maximum amount of protections possible because they have laws. They have the laws, and they got political parties on their side. So I really don't have to be concerned about women's protection as far as the New Deal is concerned, because they already have protection, right?
Yeah.
Men
Yeah.
are the ones who are unprotected right now.
Yeah. I often tell women, I say the difference between men and women, especially in Western society, Western cultures, women have they have guarantees. If they have a children, it's guaranteed that either the state or the man will come to the rescue. And that's why in America, women can have kids on a whim and be broke, poor, whatever the case may be, and know and be confident that they won't be starving somewhere. Okay. Um, you go to any third world country, it's almost like a death sentence to have a child and be single. You understand? It's a very dangerous situation for a woman. If you having a child, as a woman, you want to know that this guy that you're having this child with is going to be around and do all the things that you need him to do in that social space, because there is no state that's going to come to help you out and keep you afloat. You understand? In them third world countries, it's sink or swim. And just by proof of all the guys that go down to DR and all these other countries, we know what these women are doing to survive. Okay. In America, it's not so. We make fun of OnlyFans going down and things like that. I'm telling you, these women are not worried about OnlyFans going down. OnlyFans was a money grab, but it's not survival. At the end of the day, who should be worried about it is those women in them third world spaces who had internet and were getting money off OnlyFans. But at the end of the day, so that's the difference. They have protections. If they get married to a guy and it don't work out, they have protections. They have guarantees. Men cannot say the same thing. What's guaranteed is that, if your woman or your wife so chooses, you're going to be paying out. And, whether you're rich or average or whatever, you're going to be paying out. We often look at celebrities, payouts like, wow, ooh, wow, look at how much money he got to kick out, whatever $1,000 a month, either in child support or in alimony. And we forget, like, okay, well, that guy, like you look at a Jeff Bezos, he had to pay out his ex-wife all these millions, but then he's a billionaire again. It doesn't work out all that well all the time for the average guy, especially in a marriage, right? Child support is one thing, but a marriage is something different, where combined child support and alimony, you fuck around and be living really fucked up to maintain or support a situation that you're not even benefiting from. And that woman can go and be with a new guy and still collect from you. Dr. Dre's wife will collect from him as long as she doesn't get married again. And what's her incentive to? What's the incentive for her new guy to make her get married? I mean, let's spend Dre's money.
Yeah, and here's the thing with that too. I want the audience to think about what you just said. That was very profound right there, right? It's her incentive to get married, right? So she's got all this money, and instead of committing her resources to another man and marrying another dude, she said, well, why would I do that if I'm getting $3 million a year, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the question I'm asking men. When you look at women with money, 9 times out of 10, women who get a whole bunch of money or who earn a whole bunch of money, they don't marry dudes. I think, did Oprah ever get married to that dude? I don't think she ever got married.
No, she never got married, period.
Yeah, she never got married. Yeah, she's a billionaire now. Where's her husband, right? People talk about, oh, well, and this is where I disagree with some individuals. They like to say, well, I've never seen a man who's wealthy, who's not married. But there's plenty of women you see that are wealthy that are not married. They choose not to get married because they know what marriage does. It's only it's mostly for public image that some of these dudes get married, but that's beginning to change because we're looking at guys who are already past who got married decades ago. We're not talking about people who are getting married now in 2021. People who are getting married in 2019. We don't see as many wealthy men tying the knot since 2019 or so. You can count them on one hand.
Yeah.
But that's neither here nor there. The thing with the New Deal is that it addresses that point, right? So, if someone wants to get married, right, you can enact the New Deal. If you want to get married, that violates the New Deal, and now you're back to the old deal, or you're onto something else, right? So you can handle that. Once you get there, you can make that decision. I'm not saying you should never get married. What I am saying is that if you're going to do the New Deal, you can't be married, right? So you could switch from the New Deal to the old deal, just like someone could say, I'm going to go MGTOW for 10 years, and then I might get married afterward. Just because you're MGTOW now doesn't mean you'll be MGTOW forever, right? It's you could go monk mode for a specified period of time, and it's your life, right? I'm not going to tell men how to live their lives. I just want to lay out a framework that might be useful to some people, especially now, because one of the problems now is that you find that there's so many different alternatives, and none of it's really structured. So people are just kind of doing whatever, and they're kind of walking in without knowing what's going on. And the advantage of marriage is that you used to know what was supposed to happen when you get married, right? So you didn't have to train your partner or anything. You kind of, okay, I got a wife, or she got a husband. She got to know what to expect. With the New Deal, that kind of tells you what to expect up front, right? So if you're going to be in a serious long-term relationship, you need to speak about the New Deal with your partner. You need to tell her, what it is, and work that out. And so the first part of it is to basically, first of all, you got to think to yourself, well, what is it that I really want? What is something essential versus something I desire? And you got to get those knocked out. You got to write those down or contemplate that, right? And so this is the first phase, and then you speak it over to your partner. And I'm assuming that you and your partner are mature, right? So it's not going to sound out of pocket. You're just saying, hey, this is what I want to. You know how to have a conversation with another adult. So you tell her, these are things that are essential, right? These are things that I need, and these are things that I would like. These are things I want, right? And then you ask her the same thing, right? And so now you have a list. You have an idea of what are things that are essential for both parties, what things that are desired for both parties. That's the first phase. The second phase is to now assign tasks, or to figure out how you're going to accommodate all those needs, and how you'll be able to meet those desires, right? Because it's one thing to say, this is what I want, this is what I want, this is what she wants, great. But if you don't talk about specifically how someone's going to do something that's going to be satisfactory, it's going to leave too many things up in the air. This communication is important, right? Again, I'm not a relationship counselor. This is just what the New Deal is, right? You could go see a therapist or a relationship counselor, or even a dating coach. I'm not necessarily against any of those, but this is the second part of the New Deal. You're going to make sure that you know what you're going to do that's going to meet this and meet that, et cetera, and so forth, right? And that's basically that's effectively the New Deal. Now you could write these things down. You can save a digital copy of it. You could just keep it in your head. Preferably, I would say you should write things down, or so you could refer to it from time to time, right? Sure, you could even post it conspicuously in your house. But whatever the case may be, now you know an itemized way. You know, okay, this is what she expects. This is what she wants. This is what I expect, and this is what I want, right? And she knows that this is what I expect, and this is what I want, right? Now, this is at-will employment. This is at-will relationship. So having these things in mind, if she's not meeting these things, she'll know she's messing up. You'll know she's messing up, and you know when to walk out. There's only 3 rules. I think, let me just check to make sure I got that down. There's only 3 rules, right, to the New Deal, right? The first is that there's a zero-tolerance policy for proxy violence, threats, or abuse. I'm speaking from the male side, because on the female side, obviously those are illegal. So, it stands to reason you wouldn't do things that are illegal or immoral. You wouldn't threaten, abuse, or use proxy violence to harm your wife or your girlfriend, right? But on the man's side, because these things are not illegal to do to men, or there's very little legal consequence doing this to men, I'm making it clear to the man, I'm making it clear to all these viewers, anybody who's going to use this new deal, there is a zero tolerance policy for proxy violence, threats, or the abuse of you, basically, because you're the man, right? In these relationships, right? So if she threatens to get her brother or some other guy or
You going out, bro. So
can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay,
You talking about proxy violence. So she threatens, yeah.
Oh, so this is a zero tolerance policy for proxy violence. So if she threatens to use violence in any way, shape, or form, or threatens to bring some other guy around, or threatens to call police, or any other means of proxy violence, zero tolerance policy, that relationship is over. So you're kicking her out of your house, or you're just ending the relationship, right? That's the end. Done, right? The other rule is that there is no marriage. In the New Deal, there is no marriage. Because you have no protections, right? That's the whole point, is to give you the maximum amount of protections. Now, if you want to take that risk, by all means, go and take that risk. I'm not going to I'm not going to shame anyone who takes that risk. But now you've entered a new contract, right? You've entered a new deal that involves the state. That's out of my hand. The New Deal, you do not get married, because that gives you the maximum amount of financial protections. And I believe the last rule is, should you have children, or should you decide to have children with this woman, you and the woman need to go to the family court immediately and make those child support arrangements then and there. Because your child support arrangements and payments will be much more reasonable and accommodating if you have a willing partner, right? Remember, you're both still in good standing. So if you have those children and you're both still in good standing, it's going to be much more smooth, much easier. You're probably still going to be living in the same location. So you're still going to see your kids. You're going to be paying her child support because she's right there with you anyway. So it doesn't really make it. Your money is basically effectively coming right back to you.
Well,
right?
if it works out.
Huh?
I would say that in the same manner that someone would sign a prenup before marriage, if you're going to eliminate marriage, then that child parenting arrangement should be should precede the pregnancy, in the same way that a prenup is prenuptial. I want to read some of the stuff that you sent me here. I brought up this link, Chore Wars. I don't know if you can see it. Men, women, and housework. So it says here, based on a representative sample of all U.S. families, a recent study of housework trends revealed husbands create an extra 7 hours a week of housework for wives, but wives save husbands from about an hour of housework a week. Study was part of the University of Michigan's panel study on income dynamics, the world's longest running study of its kind, right? So the amount of housework done by women has decreased since 1976, while the amount of housework done by men has doubled. In 1976, women did about 26 hours of housework a week. In 2005, they did about 16.5. Men did about 6 hours a week in 1976, and in 2005, they did about 12.5. So let's keep going.
Can you on that first part there on a second?
This one?
I want to comment on that first part. So the title of this article is kind of misleading because it's important to understand how they're defining housework. Housework is defined, just to put it simply, the housework they're talking about is housework that women traditionally did, right? Like laundry, washing dishes, I guess sweeping up, things like that, right? They're not talking about the household chores that men traditionally do. Right. So if we look at 1976 is kind of small for me. Yeah, 76, right? Just because women were doing more of their traditional chores doesn't mean men weren't doing theirs. Men still were fixing the car. Men were still doing maintenance around the house. Men were still doing lawn work. They were still doing yard work. They were still doing all sorts of running errands. Those are the things that men would do that would consume time. The women weren't going around running errands. The women weren't doing yard work, and they weren't being the maintenance man of the house and fixing things or fixing their cars, right? And so what we're looking at is important because when we look at what year is that now? 2005. Men and women are doing approximately the same amount of housework, the same amount of traditional chores that women would do. So men are washing, they're cleaning clothes, and they're sweeping up the floor, they're vacuuming, they're doing all the things, they're ironing shirts, they're doing all the things that women would do traditionally, but they're still, although this number forgets it, they're still doing the vehicle maintenance, still doing the maintenance man work, they're still doing the yard work, they're still doing the lawn, they're still doing all those other things, you know, or whatever the case may be, setting up the air conditioner, fixing the TV, running errands, things and forth. So men are actually doing more work around the house than women now, right? And so that's something to consider as well, you know, when it comes to marriage, because we're looking at married couples here for the most. I believe the data is speaking about married couples. So that's just something for men to think about. In these traditional arrangements, in the modern marriage, you're still doing all your traditional stuff, but now you're also doing the house chores and all that extra stuff, right? So that's why this New Deal is important. And I'm you know, I will finish this thought. That's why the New Deal is important, because all of these things, the New Deal is flexible, right? When I say you put things that are essential and things that are desired, you're listing almost everything, you know, and she'll get the picture, but you're listing everything that you want that includes all of this, you know, and so it's really customizable, and it fits what a modern man and modern woman would need. But go ahead.
All right, so I just want to say this: when it comes to this idea of, you know, housework and what women contribute, you know, work wise. First of all, you got a lot of women that don't want to do this stuff. Like they think that, you know, this housework and cleaning up after you and this, that, and the other is, you know, again, it's oppressive. The thing is, now that we're in 2021, I mean 2005, you know, we had dishwashers and all this other stuff, but like at the end of the day, like in 2021, there's a lot of things that women traditionally did at home that have been made a lot easier because of, you know, machinery that you put in your house, and you know, it washes the dishes. You know, there's no back in the days, you know, washing of dishes and, you know, laundry. I mean, you throw something in the machine and you walk away and you can watch your soap operas while the shit is in the, you know, in the washing machine and the dryer and shit like that. Like, this is not like crazy work. How I know? Because I do it myself.
Yeah.
The other thing about this article, I mean, I guess that they must be talking about white folks, because there's no shortage of black households, black parents, or black women that have their children doing the bulk of this shit.
I was
Okay?
about to say, man.
Yeah, let's not pretend we all grew up in a household with a black mama, and we had our day to wash dishes, or what, you know, our day to do this, that, and the third, you know, that our mothers assigned for us, whether she was working outside of the home or not. You know, a lot of these chores get handed down to the children. Okay.
Yeah.
I know for damn sure me, my brothers and sisters had days to wash dishes to the point where my mother never had to touch a dish. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
I
you
made
know,
a post about that, I think, a few days ago, because they're saying these roles are oppressive to women. I said, well, if it's oppressive for women to wash clothes and clean dishes and stuff, then why you make your children do it? So you're oppressing your children, basically. Oh, that's good training for the children.
yeah,
I mean, you can't make this stuff up. So it's not oppressive to force your children to do this labor, but it's oppressive for a wife to do these things. And let's keep it a buck. When they talk about a man making all this extra work and stuff, look, like you said, let's keep it 100, bro. There's no way a man who's spending 60 hours at work, a black man who's working all his overtime, who's spending 60 hours at work, is producing that many dishes when he comes home. He's not home most of the week. There's only 168 hours in a week, and he's spending 60 of them out of the house, right?
yeah.
He's spending he's spending 70 of them sleep. I mean, if he's sleeping 8 hours a day, or if he's only sleeping 5 hours a day, he's at least spending 35 of them sleep. So how many hours does this man? How much dishes can he produce? And like you said, in black households, there's no shortage of paper cups, plastic cups, and paper plates. You don't wash paper plates and plastic cups.
Yeah, I mean, and again, all of these things, and let's not forget plastic slip covers. Like there's so many
Yep.
things that we grew up in our black households with that pretty much reduced the amount of housework that black mama had to do. So let me read this. This graph shows that in '05, single women with no children did a little more than 10 hours of housework a week, and married women with no children did a little more than 17 hours a week. The only difference, the presence of a husband, which costs women 7 hours of housework a week. For men, the situation is reversed. Single men with no children did about 8 hours, and married men with no children did a bit more than 7 hours, right, of housework a week. So a wife saves them about an hour of work a week. Yeah, big shit. So basically, by returning my hour to me of housework in the home, like single men with no children did about 8 hours of housework a week. Shit, I'm single. I don't have kids. I don't even know if I do 8 hours of housework.
Yeah, keep it a
Like,
buck.
this is some bullshit. Like 8 hours? Like who? 8 hours a week? I mean,
Yeah,
what?
I guess we're talking about like 1 or an hour and a half a day. I guess.
Yeah, like if I wash, if I wash dishes or whatever the case may be, you know what I'm saying? But again, like there are machines that do this stuff, and you're not, like, again, in this day and age, nobody's really standing and doing a lot of this stuff like every day for an hour. It's it's
Yeah,
it's it's it's, it's a reach. So it says
shoot, I don't. For the most part, I just have Amazon deliver my paper plates, and I use those shits. I don't really even, I mean, I got my fine china and stuff, but like, I'm not. I'm. What am I gonna be using it for?
so
Like
are we
it's.
watching this are we watching
Oh
this
no,
video?
nah, we're not watching it. That's
Okay,
pretty much the end of that article. Yeah.
so basically what I'm saying is, for what men bring to the table, I don't people would have to, men would have to gauge themselves whether that hour a week that they're saving is worth the I guess the fair, what they what wives would consider the fair trade of their presence. Like, again, an hour a week, again, like housework is not as crazy it used to be. Like, you got these little robots that vacuum your floor, sweep your floor and shit like that. Like, there's so many different things that are being used now that reduce the amount of housework that you have to do. And like you said, if a guy's out all day and you do cook his dinner, you know what I mean? How many dishes is that? Now, when you got kids, it's different, but then the kids contribute to the housework. But if it's just you and him, how much dishes is this man creating? He's probably eating breakfast, and he probably eats dinner when he gets home. And that's if he even gets breakfast. That's if he don't even if he don't cook his own breakfast. Because a lot of these situations, man, like the guy is the cook.
Yeah.
A lot of these situations, the guy does most of the cooking, the husband. So I want to let me see if I can pull up another one of these situations that you sent me. This is the married black men's opinions as to why black women are disproportionately single.
Mhm. That's
Okay.
I found that study to be rather interesting, and I want to get your comments on it. I think I sent a couple of highlights of it as well.
Yeah. So, all right. So this study's purpose was to explore the reasons black women are single according to a unique viewpoint of married black men. Okay.
Yeah.
Married black men. So they asked married black men these questions. Sample comprised 52 married black men who resided in Northeast Georgia. Interviews were conducted in 2010. The authors analyzed the data in a collaborative fashion and utilized content analysis to explore the relationships in the data, which they would derive from the qualitative interviews with the men. Findings on the reasons of the disproportionality of singlehood among Black women reflected these four themes: gender relations, marriage education, and socialization, individual development, and a preference for gay, lesbian relationships. Recommendations for future research are discussed. All right.
I might add too, just for transparency, the four authors of the study are all women. 3 are Black and 1 is white. That's so just it's important to keep that in mind when we read some of the questions they asked in that survey, some of the responses that they solicited. But go ahead. Yeah, we don't have to go through the whole thing. You kind of
I mean, that's actually interesting that that you added that. But yeah, so why does this guy keep calling me? So let's see. So recent estimates. Hold on, let me tell this guy I can't talk to him right now. So recent estimates highlight an important trend: Black women are less likely to enter into marriage or remarry than are Black women or women from other racial or ethnic groups. So further, 7 out of 10 Black women are unmarried. 3 out of 10 may never marry.
Yep.
Never marry. Thus, the disproportionate number of Black women who are single has been well documented.
Yep. And so that raised the question. Now again, there's and it's interesting because there's 3 Black women on that did the study, and based on these statistics, at least 1 out of those 3 will never marry. But it's interesting that that these people have tried to contest these statistics, things like that. Even on Kevin Samuel's show, they tried to contest, like, well, that's not true. But I mean, this is a study conducted by 3 Black women, right, and 1 white woman. They confirmed. I mean, these things, the sources are all right here. It's well documented that Black women undermarry, and many will never marry. And the marriage rate for Black women is only going down. And so a multitude of studies have been conducted with Black women, asking them why they think they'll never be married, but no one has ever really asked Black men why they believe they'd be married. And to be honest, to my knowledge, this is the only study I've ever read that actually got Black men's opinions. I think I have 1 more, but I forgot. I'll find it for you at another date.
Well, nobody asked us shit. That's why. So, social scientists have found a considerable heterogeneity in Black women's reasons for remaining single. Among those desiring to marry, scholars have identified barriers relating to economic instabilities, challenges that undermine long-term relationship success, difficulty trusting, current relationship problems, pain from past relationships, inequities in human capital between partners, fears of divorce, and concerns about readiness of marriage, e.g., lack of skills and preparedness for marriage. Other work suggests that some women are happy to remain unmarried given their uncertainties about the permanency of marriage, or their desire to concentrate on their personal life or professional lives, and personal responsibilities. I'm sorry.
I just want to add real quickly that that word homogeneity is very significant, because these studies were conducted with different Black women from across the board, randomly selected, all over the United States, and almost every single Black woman they interviewed in these several studies came up with these exact same answers that we have all heard before. So I just wanted to, add that there.
So one is a message of independence, e.g., God bless the child who has her own, with its implication that Black men cannot be trusted to stay with and provide for women. The other is a message that a woman's utmost goal is to find a black man that will take care of her. These contradictory statements have created situations which either women do not form lasting intimate relationships with men, or women experience difficulties in their intimate ties through prior work. Though prior work has sampled black women to learn more about reasons for remaining single, few studies have considered the perspectives of married black men. We focused on the opinions of these men for three reasons. First, while previous research has examined union formation from the perspective of black women, rarely is the perspective of married black men reported in studies of marriage patterns in the black community. I think rarely the perspective of black men is reported anywhere. But the voices of perspectives of black men who could provide in-depth accounts are largely absent from literature. To respond to our inquiry, the men in the present study offered opinions about relationships by reflecting their own dating and marital histories, as well as their observations of intimate ties in their families and communities. We obtained perspectives from men who value marriage as evidenced by their commitment to enrolling in and completing a marriage enrichment program. Okay, so obviously, like, these guys are willing to get married because they are married.
Yep.
Right? They are married. Right? Black men want to get married.
Yep.
They want to get married. They want to get married. They want to have children, you know. I mean, I'm sure that there's a decent amount of black men who don't want to get married. But if you look in that population, you have to ask why. And I always have said over the years, I said, when it comes to black men, why is always ignored. There's never a why. No one asks why. If the white man shoots up the school, or white man shoots up the concert, white man shoots up the movie theater, everybody searches for the why. Black woman does something, white woman does something, everyone searches for the why. When black men do anything, everyone ignores the why. No one asks why. Nobody gives it humanity. Nobody, considers, well, what did this man go through or experience that led him to making these decisions or not making these decisions? All right, so marriage, real quick, I'm gonna read this quick. Marriage uniquely offers benefits in physical, psychological, and financial well-being. Children raised in marriage-based households also exhibit more favorable developmental outcomes over time. For many black adults who do not wish to marry, marriage seems like an elusive goal. They are not turning away from marriage. On the contrary, members of the black community still respect the institution and its symbolic value. Given that stable, satisfying marriages have been associated with positive outcomes, single black women may not be reaping the benefits of the rewards that marriage offers. But a lot of these women, they want to be single. They're choosing to be single because they, for some, some social, all these things that are telling black women that they are empowered by staying single. Beyonce made a song, All the Single Ladies. If you like it, you should have put a ring on it, right? Of course, that's the other part. She made the song about while being married herself.
Yep.
Right? I think that the thing, homogeneity, point of view. To be honest, I think that, and I'm gonna get flack for saying this, but I think that if black women were desired by other ethnic groups and races of men more so than they are, then they would get married more. I don't think that it's a situation where they're getting all this love from outside and they're turning down all of these opportunities for race loyalty. I don't believe.
Let me comment on that, man. I'm gonna tell it to you straight, bro. I'm gonna keep it a buck. If black women could have done that, they would have been doing it. Because every time they've had the chance, now I want to go back to one or two things in that study, but that's just down the line. That's under results. But when it comes to this, if when black women first arrived, it was in 1790 that they arrived. By 1808, there was more blacks being bred here in the United States than being imported, right? But
Yeah.
by 1830, 31, right, merely 40 years. I think it was 1821 actually. So merely 30 years after black women began arriving en masse to the United States, right? The keyword en masse. The majority were now here. When they started, merely 30 years, you started getting female slave owners, black female slave owners, right? Now remember, the overwhelming majority of slaves were owned by white men and white women. So I'm not in any way, shape, or form insinuating that black women owned uh, uh, significant numbers of black people. What I am saying is that nearly 70% of black people who were owned by other black people, which is around 30,000 or so, were owned by black women, not because they were buying family members and trying to reunite with family members, but because they were using them for business gain, financial gain. So even though black women were given very little access to mainstream society and whiteness, they latched onto it as soon as they could. Right at the end of the Civil War, there are accounts of black of female slaves running up to the white Union soldiers, and trying to marry these men, like asking them to marry them and things like that. I mean, it is the thing is, as if black women could have abandoned black men, they would have done so a long time ago, and they've tried. It was never really illegal for a black woman to marry a white man, right? It was frowned upon, but the anti-miscegenation laws were not enforced effectively against black women. It was only enforced against a black man and a white wife, right? And you do have rare cases of a black man with a white wife, but by and large, that was what was illegal, right? So if white men always had access to black women, other races of men always had access to black women, and if black women could have got with these guys, they would have been done so. It's just these
Well,
guys aren't choosing. I mean,
well, we
BGS just a few like 2 or so weeks ago, like they're having babies by these guys. They got 1.2 million babies by men that aren't black men, but you don't see 1.2 million more black women that are wives to men of other races. So
see,
it's obvious what's going on.
it's funny that you mentioned that last thing, because when we talk about the um the the single mother rate among black women, is often assumed that that's all black men's children. You understand what I'm saying? Like, we do the numbers, and I've done the numbers before where, we say, okay, this percentage of black men is single with no kids, and this percentage of black men are married, and that makes up about 70% of black men in America, right? That falls under that category. So then we tend to say, okay, well, if 70% of black mothers are single, who's getting all these women pregnant? And we tend to say, okay, well, small amount of black men getting most of the black women pregnant, multiple births, Pookie Ray Ray, guys in and out of jail, and things of that nature. But one thing that we don't speak about is how many of these black single mother births are attributed to other races of men.
Indeed, and it's important to note that these other races of men, they never get this negative stigma for that, right? It's only black men who have to hold the, like, really, it's like what we call an educated man, the non-select man. But, since most black men, we just call them non-select. Like the non-select, the educated lady, they're the ones who have to hold the L for everybody else's fuck up. And that's what really gets me, that's what really I find it rather interesting, right? Because I shared one study before, I believe it was conducted by the CDC. It was a fertility study for men for multiple births, and it showed that only 8% of men, this is all men, had more than one children by more than one partner, right? Think about it. Only 8% of all men in America had more than one child by more than one woman, And of those men that had that, 68% had some prison history or some jail history. They've done some time. So these women are choosing those guys. But then on top of it, like you said, you also have men who are of other communities who may or may not be part of that group, right? May or
Yeah.
may not be that group. So why are all the black men who are productive, who are thorough, who are getting things done, who are good men, why do these men have to hold the L for everybody else? Right? And that's why the New Deal is designed the way it is.
Well,
That's why it's designed the way it is.
white supremacy teaches us, and I like to say it like we learn it like in church or something. White supremacy teaches us to attribute the positive behaviors and attributes of other races of men to their group, and attribute the worst behaviors and attributes of black men to all black men, right?
Yeah.
It's just like how you when you talk about Pookie's, Ray Rays, or whatever, black women tend to give them all the positive attributes. Oh, he got swag, this and that and the other. His pipe game is like this, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if those men, or when those men abuse, murder, or whatever they do, have kids with multiple women, whatever they do, those actions and behaviors are attributed to the entire group, not just Pookie and Ray Ray. So good traits and good behaviors and things like that are specific to a subset, but negative behaviors and negative attributes and negative traits are attributed to the entire group, including the men that don't fit the description of the man that did it to you. You understand what I'm saying? And that work, that's how it works for black men, where, conversely, when you're talking about white men, we tend to ignore, Billy Bob and Jeb and the whole trailer park population of America. And we tend to imagine, white men as, hair comb over, suit and tie, and Beckham or Brad Pitt or George Clooney types, right? That's our image of white men. We don't think about the majority in this country. Man, listen, I just drove across this country from New York to Las Vegas, and I got to see a lot of middle America. Okay, I got to see a lot of middle America. I mean, aside from at one point living in a small town with hardly any black people in it, I got to see a lot of middle America. And that Jerry Springer shit is real. Okay, that Jerry Springer shit is a real thing. And, that's not what's being promoted. If you got a group that controls the narrative and the visuals of what you see and what you are to believe, if you're being told all positive things about one group, and words are important, you know, men who belong to a certain ethnic group or a dominant group or whatever, when they commit crimes and this and that, everything is done to present them as, oh, he was a guy, a pillar in his community, and this and that and the other. What would make him do this? And then when you talk about another, ethnic group, you don't say any of these things. You don't say anything positive. You go right into his criminal record and all the terrible things that he's done. Over time, you start to believe that these guys are pit bulls, right? And these guys over here are what you call it? What's the dogs with the little barrel around their neck? The dogs that come and save you off the mountain if you're dying from hypothermia. The thing is, us as black people, we have internalized white supremacy because this is our environment. We've lived here for hundreds of years now. So we have internalized that point of view about black people ourselves, and that this is where we are. So that's why you
Or
have
rather,
black women. I'm sorry.
or rather, I said, or rather, we might say that we've internalized this view of black men, right? Because we fought
Yeah.
vehemently to change and sanctify, almost to the point of mother worship or angelicizing black women to the point where they, even when they clearly do wrong, they can't do wrong, or there must have been a reason why, or somebody put her up to it. There was even a video. You remember that woman that walked up and shot someone right in the head in Brooklyn, and the cops, the detective, said somebody must have put her up to this. Right? They were already trying to find a man to pin that murder.
You're going out, bro. You're going out.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Oh, you can hear me now? Yeah. So when it was, remember that shooting in Brooklyn? A black woman walked up to somebody and shot her right in the head. Walked right back
Yeah,
to the
yeah,
car, and people are
yeah.
words to angelicize her, or to basically make it not her fault. Whereas with black men, you don't have that thing. So it's really, you know, it, we could say black people in general, but really America has our history here has basically taught us that, you know, as my friend Keith Lamont likes to say, black bad. Really, that's the logic. At the end of the day, regardless of what the Bible is, it's black bad. Where in this case, speaking about black men, it's always black men bad. That's basically what it is, right? Because with black women, they have varying degrees of latitude, right? But when it comes to black men, you get no flexibility. You
Well,
it's hard.
that latitude only works in the hood, though. Like, you know, when black women do anything outside of the black community to any other ethnic group or the dominant group, they don't get that latitude. But they do get it in the black community, which is why, you know, someone saying black men are the white people of black people is ridiculous. It's obvious. It's obvious that it's the other way
Yeah.
around because you know, but the funny thing about that incident that you're talking about, it's very rare that men use women for that sort of proxy violence. It's
Yep.
very rare. It's very rare. If anything, it much more often happens the other way around, and we've seen it a million times. Usually, you know, when women do things like that, and especially out on a crowded street in front of cameras and things like that, that was something emotional. That was something passionate, whatever the case may be. If I had to guess, I would say it's over a man.
Yep.
I would say it's over dick, right? You know, the idea that a man sent her to do that is stupid.
Yeah.
It's stupid. So a man hired a woman to shoot another woman in front of a crowd of people. That would have to be the dumbest hit, you know, way to hire someone to carry out a hit that I've ever seen in my life.
Yep.
It doesn't even make sense for the police to even think about it that way.
Women
Shows
cannot be
yeah,
wrong.
yeah, it shows how retarded they are. Like, if I hired a woman to shoot another woman, of course I wouldn't want her to do it that way because then she would get caught and then it would lead back to me.
Yep.
That's not,
Obvious.
yeah, that would be the sloppiest hit ever committed, like in the history of hits. Like, come on, man. Like,
Ridiculous.
knock it off, you know. But so let me read this here. This is new research on attractiveness and mating. And we about a little over an hour in, so we're gonna end this soon. So
All right.
new research on what people find desirable and essential in a long-term partner is based on two of the largest national studies of mate preferences ever conducted. The studies examine how heterosexual mate preferences differed according to a person's gender, age, personal income, education, and appearance satisfaction. Okay, so this research supports the long-held belief that people with desirable traits have a stronger bargain in hand and could be more selective when choosing romantic partners, but it also challenges other commonly held mating beliefs. The studies examine how heterosexual mate preferences differ according to a person's age, blah, 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 blah. Right? So, I guess what this kind of says is, I guess the like you said, the better position, the better situation, the better position that someone is in, the better they can, I guess, negotiate. Or this is about what, sexual market value.
Yeah, I mean, this study, it's funny because these are all things we spoke about in the manosphere and the black manosphere long ago. I mean, there's plenty of studies that are just coming up now. Well, this one's actually 2015, but there's plenty of studies that are getting more attention now. This study essentially confirms sexual marketplace value. And you got a little list there, which is kind of interesting because it shows the obvious, right? That desirable, essential men rated women at 92%. It's like, if she's not hot, I'm not with it. That's basically what that says. And women, contrary to popular belief, had looks at 84%. So 84% of the women said, no, if he's not physically attractive, I'm not with it. So looks matter. Looks definitely matter to women, right?
Yeah, I've been saying that for a long time. Go ahead. Yeah.
Exactly. When you look at a slender body, contrary to popular belief, people believe that, oh yeah, any woman can be beautiful any size. Well, according to this, 80% of men said, no, if she's not slender, then that's it, right? If I can't bend her and she's not slender, I don't want to bid. I don't want none of it. Now the women had slender at 58%. So if you're a dude and you're overweight, or you're a dude and you're in shape, you're in the clear. But if you're a dude and you're kind of skinny, that's not a good look for 58% of women, right? Steady income, obviously, men. Now I had a discussion with a friend of mine, Zeke Allen. I had a discussion with them over a couple of posts about, whether I think Michael Gomez about that men do not value a woman's income the same way a woman values a man's income. Well, right here in this study, it shows that a woman with a steady income, only 74% of men cared, right? So that's a large percentage. But look at how many women cared. 97% of women cared that a man had a steady income. Men don't care about stable income the same way women does, right? Of course, in today's modern age, depending on the city you live in, if she has a stable income, that's great, but he's not depending on it, right? Whereas for women, 97% of women desired a man with steady income. That was essential. And then when it comes to make a lot of money, that's where it kind of pairs in. If she has any type of income, if she's making $20,000 a year, or all that matters is that she was stable, right, to men, because as long as she doesn't have to make a lot of money. Only 47% of men cared if she made a lot of money, but 69% of women cared, right? Ultimately, this study and another study, which we're probably not going to go over that today, but this study and another study basically showed that as women age, the things that they find desirable or essential change. And that's the key. Women in their 20s care more about looks. They care more about genetic material. They care more about how their baby's going to look. They care more about looks and status than they do about money. But whereas women in their 30s and up, they care more about money and status than looks, or money and looks and status, right? For men, what was essential and desirable effectively remained the same, right? And what does this all mean? This kind of brings us back to one of the original points you mentioned at the outset of our discussion, is that ultimately what women describe and want in a man ends up being what? A patriarch. That's what they end up looking for. At the end of the day, they want a guy who makes more money, a guy who's physically fit or taller or bigger than them. They want a man who's going to provide and protect for them, right? They're essentially looking for a patriarch. That's effectively what they wanted. That's effectively what they'll always want. And so what's interesting about the New Deal is that we'll see what things women will list as essential and what they'll list as desirable, as opposed to what men list as essential and desirable, because ultimately this thought experiment may end up just resulting back in a traditional patriarchy, where both sides think that they're doing something new and different, but in the end, they're effectively getting the same thing without a marriage license. Because ultimately what the study shows that this is what women want. What are your thoughts?
I mean, well, you get the same thing. You just call it something different, and it's we already named a few things that you say are similar to patriarchies, but they're female focused, right? So men are essentially performing the same job and the same function, but the focus is not on them or the power shifts or whatever the case may be. Let's read this section right here, and this is this study. He said the one. This is one of the largest studies ever conducted, right?
Yeah.
What it says at the top: income. People with higher incomes have stronger preferences for partners who are good looking, and this is something that I hate to mention Kevin Samuel's name because then it would give some sort of credence to the idea that I get this point of view from him, and this is something that we've all been saying for years. This is true for both men and women. When women make money, they want guys who look good. That's why you see all these women that they're making money now, and their demand for physical appearance, physical attributes and things like that has gone up. And that's why I say, looks matter, especially when women have money. They're no longer needing or looking for a man for survival. Of course, they're looking for good-looking guys, but the contradiction is they also want these guys to take care of them, even with their higher income brackets, right? So men with higher
Yep.
incomes show stronger preferences for women with slender bodies. Wealthier women had stronger preferences for men who had a steady income or made lots of money. There it is. Wealthier women has stronger preferences for men who had a steady income and made lots of money. So you're wealthy, but you're looking for wealthy. So education, men with more education has stronger preferences for female partners who are good looking and slender. However, for both men and women, education level was not related to preferences for steady income or making a lot of money. Right?
Yep.
Age, older people, both men and women, have weaker preferences for a partner that they find physically attractive, who make as much money as they do, and who had a successful career. So that also puts the idea out, women's demands from men decrease over time in reference to how they look or how much money they make. They begin to care less. When they're younger, they're hot shit and they want the world, but as they get older, their preferences start to diminish, and things of that nature. All right, so a total of nearly 28,000 heterosexual participants ages 18 to 75 years old completed the surveys.
Yep. And just a brief statistics note. Generally speaking, for a population over 10,000, if you lose a sample size of 385, you have a confidence interval of 95%. Given that your standard deviation is 0.5, that plus or minus 10% margin of error, that sample size represents
You're going in and out, bro. Going in and out.
that covers. I'll go in
You
and out.
started.
But can you hear me better now?
Yeah, I can hear you better now.
Better now?
Yeah.
Uh, Effectively, it's interesting that across all the boards, basically men desired looks, and they mentioned slender build. So all these women talking about, it doesn't matter how big I am.
Going in and out now. Yo, your signal.
You can hear me better now?
Yeah, you saying all these
Hello,
women that
hello.
talking about. Yeah, I can hear you fine. You talking about women who talking about how big they are.
Yeah, like how the size doesn't matter or all that other stuff. All that body positivity stuff is just a social engineering project, but it's clearly not working because they've been doing that that body positivity thing for the past 10 years, and study after study keeps showing men don't give a damn. So this is
Well,
still what men value looks.
listen, trying to convince men to like bigger women is like trying to convince women to like broke and short men. You understand what I'm
Yep.
saying? Like no amount of shaming and social pressure is going to change that. No amount. They're just not into it. Not only
Indeed.
that, not only that, but if it was a short broke movement, they would laugh. It would be funny. But for some reason, we're supposed to take the body positive movement seriously. If they want to do body positivity for the media or Hollywood or whatever, fine. Let them do what they do. But you're not going to change men's preferences with shaming. It's just not going to happen. It's never going to
Yep.
happen. You're never going to change what people want. You can't change what women want. You can't change what men want. All the things that we just read that women are preferring, they want men that make money. They want attractive men. All these things that women are wanting in men has been true since the beginning of time. And it's not going to change. So even to men that are listening to this, bros, this is what women want. All right. And, even the guys that get mad at like Kev and he's talking about high value man and things like that. At the end of the day, what you define as a high value person or high value man is your business. Understand that's what women are looking for. We understand what it means in the context of what he's saying. He's saying they value it. So from their perspective, it's high value. We don't often hear women saying, "Oh, we want the nice guy who gonna pet my dog," and none of that bullshit. They want guys who look good and get money. These are two things that if you can try to be your best to look the best you that you can possibly look, and go get some money. The money's out there, go get it, right? So, and I understand we're black guys. Our path to money is not as easy as us, but do what you need to do. Do what you need to do, right? And understand. Let me say this real quick. Understand that their preferences are not going to change. We understand that ours aren't either. We understand that, but this goes both ways. Our preferences are not going to change. Their preferences are not going to change. I'm not saying go out there and trick. I'm saying look like money. Give the appearance of money. Give the appearance of success. I tell guys all the time, don't spend money on women. Spend it on yourself to make yourself look like money. Make yourself look successful, because that alone will attract the women.
Indeed. I always advocate for men to, number one, to understand the concept of look, money, status. Everything that you said, coincides perfectly with that simple three word phrase: looks, money, status. Get your looks game up, get your money up, get your status up. That's pretty much it. The next thing is I normally advocate for guys to take a defensive position, right? First and foremost, make sure that you got your shit good, get yourself together, make sure your guap is protected, make sure your money is protected. You know what I'm saying? You don't want to be made a victim out here. You know what I'm saying? But then because that gives you time to think and to strategize and to plan. You know what I'm saying? If you're not behind cover and people shooting at you, you really don't got no time to think about nothing. You're just gonna go back to instinct. But if you're behind a solid object and people shooting at you, now you have some time to think about what your next move will be, right? So make sure that you protect yourself legally, financially, mentally. Make sure you're protected. Then from there, just like Marcus was saying, you got to build yourself up, and then everything else falls into place from there. Everything else falls into place from there. But I'm not a relationship counselor or anything like that. But these are things that are just pretty much, like you just said, bro, like these are things that haven't changed for time immemorial. It's always been that way. A lot of, disinformation about female nature that's put out there, right? Where women are saying that, no, we really want nice guys. We want this, we want that. I mean, one of the studies I was just reading recently, I think I shared again, but one of the studies I was reading recently, like I said, the women that you want in their 20s They're looking for looks, money, status. They're looking for DNA. They're looking at, you know, for more physical attractiveness. Whereas women in their 30s, once they've had children already, now they're looking for the dads, right? And that study, instead of saying Chad, the study said CAD, right? So they're looking for the CADs in their 20s and the dads in their 30s, right? So if you don't got kids, you don't want to be a dad. And hell, even if you do got kids, you don't want to be a dad to someone else's kid. You want to be able to, you know, be that CAD. Well, if you want to be that CAD, just like Marcus just said, you gotta get that money up. You gotta get your looks up as best you can. And you know, the 80-20 rule is relative to a woman's social circle, like her social sphere, what sphere she's in. So if you could be, you know, you're not gonna be top 20% in the world. That's just don't even try to do that. That's just stupid. Don't try to do that. But being somebody in your social sphere, being somebody in the circles you're in, getting your status up in the circles you're in, you can do that. Getting your money up in the areas you in, getting your money up, period, you can do that. Getting your looks up, you can do that free anyway. You know, so, or a gym membership or get a personal trainer. It is what it is. But these are things that we can control. So we got to do that and know your worth so that you don't accept less. You know, and that's the deal.
So yo, we're gonna conclude this, man. This is part one, right? Just like the title of the video says. This is the New Deal part one with my man Adam and McMoore, Adam and McTow. We're gonna do this again, and we're gonna touch on those other you know, pieces of information you sent me. I also want to send a shout out to Dominique Huff, who I want him to join us the next time we do this, because yeah, you familiar with Dom, you familiar with Huff, man. You know, yeah, Huff does a lot of work, man. You know what I'm saying? So I definitely want to include him on the next stream. A lot of like-minded points of view there. And yeah, man. So this is the New Deal, social contract, and the future of Black relationships, part one. Now me and Huff have a lot of similar points of view when it comes to SYSBM. So it's gonna be interesting to hear him talk on the live stream, man. And it'd be cool to at some point get Dennis Sperling on one of these, man. Even though me and Dennis, we don't see eye to eye on the COVID situation, we do see eye to eye on this topic. But yeah, me and him spar on the on Facebook here and there. But yo, man, thanks for finally jumping in one of these, man. It's, like I said, this has been some years that I've been trying to get this guy to get into a live stream, man. Because like I said, you post a lot of interesting points of view. You post a lot of information, studies, research, and that's what, you know, this is about. Like I like research-based opinions, data, information, studies, and things of that nature, not just random assertions and things like that, man. We gotta, come from a place of facts. All right, so we're gonna do this again. Yo, thanks for jumping in here. For everybody that peeped it, shout out to y'all. Wish we had some more comments up in this motherfucker, man. But peace out, man. Next week we're gonna be on again. 100, man. You going in and out, man. I can't hear you. Oh man, oh man, your signal. We gonna jump off, man. Thanks for coming down. Shout out to Queens, New York. It's Brooklyn in the house too. Peace.